Did you see The Call of the Wild this past winter, or at least the trailer? Did you know that it was based on a story that was written over 100 years ago, and its writer is known as one of America's best authors of the early 20th century? Did you know that the story was based on one of the author's many adventures, this one during the gold rush of the Klondike in the late 1800s? Let me introduce you to this adventurous author, Jack London. Jack London was born John Griffith Chaney on January 12, 1876, to a single young woman, Flora Wellman. She and his father had lived together for a time, but William Henry Chaney denied that he was Jack's father and left before Jack was born. Flora had difficult delivery and was unable to care for Jack when he was born. On the same night, the same doctor delivered a stillborn baby to an African-American woman, Jenny Prentice. The doctor introduced the two ladies, and Aunt Jenny became Jack's wet nurse. Later, Jenny's husband introduced Flora to John London, and they soon married. Jack lived with the Prentices off and on during his childhood. Biographer Gene Reisman states, by the time he was 21, he had, so to speak, two fathers and two mothers, and the fact that one of these mothers was black and herself a former slave helped London later on to write about the non-white heroes. Jack didn't have much access to books, but would read every chance he got. He is pictured here with his dog Rolo. It may be that his love for reading and his love for his dog led to some of his writings. Jack's family was poor. By the age of 11, Jack was doing all kinds of work, from delivering newspapers to setting up pens in a bowling alley to working in a canning factory. By age 15, he joined a gang of oyster pirates. He must have enjoyed the adventurous sea life, because at age 17, he became a seaman on a sealing schooner, heading to the Northwest Pacific. These adventures on the Pacific Ocean provided Jack with experiences to write about, including a short story, A Raid on the Oyster Pirates, pictured here. Jack struggled with completing school. He re-entered high school, but soon left. He passed the entrance exam for college, but left after one semester due to money issues. I think it was really his desire for adventure. He traveled to the Klondike to join the gold rush in 1897. Even though he didn't find gold, he did have important experiences that gave him the material for a number of short stories and two of his most famous novels, The Call of the Wild and White Fang. Biographer Reisman stated, that was the turning point in London's life and career. As he put it, it was in the Klondike that I found myself. There, nobody talks and everyone listens. There, you get your perspective. I got mine. Jack married Bessie Mattern in 1900, and they had two daughters, Joan and Becky. Bessie didn't like Jack's adventurous side, and their marriage didn't last. They divorced in 1904, and Jack married his second wife, Charmaine Kittredge, in 1905, and they had one child who only lived for a few days. Charmaine became the mate woman he had dreamed of, a true comrade for his adventures and a love mate for life. During both of his marriages, Jack continued his adventures. He traveled to London, England, and lived in the East End, which was known as the worst slums in the world. This experience led to his writing, The People of the Abyss. He also covered the Russo-Japanese War and gathered writing material from his time in Japan and Korea. After his marriage to Charmaine, they sailed up to Honolulu, Tahiti, Samoa, and Fiji in the Solomon Islands. Jack used his experiences from this trip to write several short stories set in these areas. During the last 5 years of his life, he and Charmaine drove a 4-horse wagon over 1,300 miles up to the coast of Oregon and back. They sailed on a 5-month voyage from Baltimore around Cape Horn to Seattle. He traveled to Veracruz to report on the war in Mexico, and they returned to Hawaii for 5 months. On November 22, 1916, Jack London died at the age of 40 at his home on Beauty Ranch. The cause of death was kidney and heart failure. Jack London was a modernistic writer of realism and naturalism. The different settings of his stories introduce his readers to places they might not be able to visit. The majority of his stories were adventures, but later writings included his war correspondence, fantasy fiction, and letters. Jack London was one of the hardest working and most productive writers of his time. Critic Anderson stated, "The key to London's success was his ability to make his adventurous stories embody his philosophical and political ideas rather than have those ideas explicitly drive the stories." As reported by Reisman, London's combination of naturalism and romance is never more powerful than The Call of Wild. A classic in word literature, it is a poetic journey of life and death with a near universal Western thematic pattern of the myth of the hero. It is the story of discovering who you were meant to be. As one writer states, he is truly a writer for everyone, of whatever age, background, sex, or nationality. Jack London is America's best claim to a world author.